Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And it's Billboard Breakdown. So I was hoping this week was going to be where things started to get back to normal. Of course, it wasn't always going to get there. Nicki Minaj is working on rolling out her newest album while beefing with Remy Ma, and as such, we got the results of that showing up here. But otherwise, it looks like we've got a bit of a breather, at least until Drake swamps the chart next week, but we'll get to that when that happens. In the meantime, let's take a look at our top 10. Now, as everybody will predict, Ed Sheeran still has the number one spot with Shape of You, and I honestly don't see this changing. Even though its airplay gains are starting to slow down a little bit, it's still gaining and dominant in nearly every other category. Compare this to That's What I Like by Bruno Mars, its closest competition at number 2. It's also got momentum in every category, but the margins are just too wide at this point to really effectively narrow the gap. And what's telling is that it's not dominant in any one category beyond maybe sales. Because Bad and Bougie by Migos and Lil Uzi Vert may have fallen to number 3, but it's primarily here thanks to its huge streaming. And even if you look into the on-demand category, it's actually starting to slip. Go to I Don't Want to Live Forever by Zayn and Taylor Swift at number 4, and you see kind of a similar situation. Tremendous radio with momentum, solid sales, but it doesn't have streaming or YouTube in the same way. It's weak there. Then we've got our first new song in the top 10, I Feel It Comin' by The Weeknd, featuring Daft Punk at number 5. And I really can't complain. I like the song a lot. It actually seemed to hit a peak on the radio this week, but it picked up big sales gains and even some decent streaming. If it gets any momentum there, it'll probably stick around for a little while. Compare this to Tunnel Vision by Kodak Black, which is only here because of streaming and YouTube. Yeah, I know, I got it wrong last week. I was pulling my YouTube numbers from the wrong charts, but again, it's not selling. The radio won't touch it, so I don't see it having a lot more momentum to stay in the top 10 the second that streaming drives up. Now, this pushed back Love on the Brain by Rihanna down to number 7, where it seems like radio momentum has finally stalled out, and any streaming gains were halted by weakening sales. Now, this puts it up against something just like this by the Chainsmokers featuring Coldplay at number 8, which continue to rise on some strong sales and some decent airplay momentum. This looks like it's got a shot at being a real genuine hit if it gets the streaming under control. Certainly more than Paris by the Chainsmokers right now, which fell down to number 9 because it's got some radio traction, but it's losing sales and streaming. I'm not sure how viable it is beyond the radio. Finally, we've got our second new top 10 entry, and one that I honestly never expected would get this big, I Spy by Kyle featuring Lil Yachty at number 10. It's really here thanks to YouTube and decent enough streaming, but radio and sales seem to be catching up. I'm actually thinking there's some promise here, so I'm excited where this goes. It's a pretty damn good song. And on that opposite note, our losers and dropouts. The majority of them were from Ed Sheeran album tracks, but we had a couple big dropouts too. All Time Low by Jon Bellion, Side to Side by Ariana Grande featuring Nicki Minaj, Used to This by Future featuring Drake, Star of the Show by Thomas Rhett, and A Guy with a Girl by Blake Shelton. And unsurprisingly, Ed Sheeran occupied the majority of our losing slots as well, with Castle on the Hill falling down to 52. Not nearly as bad as I was expecting. It might have some longevity here. Perfect fell to 60, Galway Girl went to 63, Die fell to 85, and Happier went to 94. The rest of our losers, well, a bit of a mixed bag. I'm not really all that surprised to see Coming On Strong by The Future and The Weeknd drop to 96, or I Got You by Bebe Rexha fall to 82, and Today by Brad Paisley seems to have lost traction to fall to 89. Never really had a lot of buzz to begin with, honestly. I'm not really surprised there. But then there's Green Light by Lorde, and yeah, apparently the sales fell off hard and it crashed down to 39. But you know what? It's got some radio traction, so I have to hope that'll help stabilize before it's too late. I really want this to be a hit. And speaking of stabilization, our returning entries and our gains. In the former case, a fair number of songs that have been knocked back by Ed Sheeran are now climbing back onto the charts. The frustrating thing is that outside of Scared to Be Lonely by Martin Garrix and Dua Lipa at number 100, I would not consider any of these all that good. I don't need to hear more songs from Gucci Mane or Migos, and yet Good Drank with 2 Chainz went up to 93, and Slippery went up to 99. Then there's Black by Dierks Bentley returning to 88, but it's been all over the place recently, not all that surprised. Along with El Amante by Nicky Jam. The surprise though was You're Welcome by Dwayne Johnson coming back to 92, but all the Moana songs got a boost this week, with Alessia Cara's version of How Far I'll Go rising to 76, and the original from Ali Cravalho up to 46. As for the rest of the gains, it's hard to say that any of them are all that good. Mask Off by Future continues its momentum up to 19, as does Rolex by Ayo and Tio up to 34, and the rest is what we got is either run-of-the-mill country like In Case You Didn't Know by Brett Young up to 68, or Hometown Girl by Josh Turner up to 81, or just outright crap like Play That Song by Train up to 58, seriously, why won't that song die? Or Heavy by Linkin Park and Kiara up to 69. The only game where I'm actually really excited is Redbone by Childish Gambino up to 56, mostly thanks to having some traction in on-demand streaming because there's no way in hell the radio is gonna touch it. But okay, I'm happy that it's getting traction. What about our new arrivals? Starting off with number 95, Problems by Black.
Remember that I tried to build you, now I ain't worried about shit. I got real shit to stress about, girl, I ain't worried about shit. Remember that I tried to build you, now I ain't worried about shit.
You know, sometimes it feels like the new trap MCs just fall out of the woodwork, but it's a little less common these days to see them with a major label push instead of just natural free-flowing independent buzz. That's the feeling I got for Black, an Atlanta MC who dropped a record in late 2016 that I never heard and got requested for, and now this is his second single that's hit the Hot 100. And while there are a lot of MCs trying to imitate Future's mumbling, I don't think I've heard an MC in some time go for broke in the melancholic, foul despair that Future utilizes quite as strongly as Black does, from the crushing bass to the fried out flute melody beneath it. And the situation's kind of ugly too. The relationships are toxic, overloaded with hypocrisy, and while Black acknowledges that a lot of his lifestyle did play a part in it, it sounds like the girl came in with expectations that he doesn't want to fulfill, and ambitions that she really won't back up. Yeah, it's dark and kind of miserable, but the framing knows that, and honestly, I don't dislike this song at all. I'm not gonna see myself returning to it all that much, but there's a place for tracks like this, and it's not bad, at least in my books. Number 78, Liability by Lorde.
For me, you're a liability. You're a little much for me. So they pull back, make other plans. I understand, I'm a liability. Get you wild, make you leave. I'm a little much for.
I've been hearing mixed things about this song ever since it dropped. Some people were disappointed that Lorde decided to put out a sparse piano ballad, that it was too conventional. And yeah, the instrumentation is pretty reserved, the production doesn't do a lot with it, and that's courtesy of Jack Antonoff, but that's because the main focus is on Lorde's textured and really expressive delivery, the story that she's telling. And it's the story that actually has the weight here. Not just about the relationship that fell stale, but also the relationship that she has with her audience. And while I can see this song get appropriated by a lot of girls who want to play to the high melodrama of it all and use it as justification for being hard to handle and dramatic, but I feel there's a level of nuance here that'll go missed by a lot of those listeners, because Lorde isn't so much being dramatic or melodramatic here in her language as she is describing a level of intensity in her persona that so few people can actually reciprocate or handle, dancing in her storm, a little too much for most people, be they romantic partners or her audience. And that can sting all the further when in order to get away from all that intensity, they just brush her aside, get detached, dismiss her. There's a real emotional core in this song that honestly reminds me a little bit of what we got in that Vagabond debut that I covered yesterday, and its closing track, and Lorde's expressiveness easily puts it a cut above there. It's a great song, and while I've got no illusions that this will really be a hit, I dig it all the same. Really damn good song. Number 72, Chanel by Frank Ocean.
Got 5 stories to tell. I see both sides like Chanel. See on both sides like Chanel. Swimming laps through pool water. Eating like I'm underworld. Had my tattoos in Shibuya. Police think I'm of the underworld.
Okay, I was surprised that Frank Ocean showed up with Calvin Harris and Migos, but it might be even more surprising that he dropped a new track seemingly without warning. And while I kinda came around fast on Slide, it might take me a lot longer with Chanel. Don't get me wrong, some of the lyrical ideas and seeing both sides of fame, both in reveling in the opulence and success while half-heartedly mocking it, that has some potential, instrumental, but I'm not quite sure the subtext resonates quite as well as intended, most because for all the dualities that he calls out, most of the new money bragging doesn't really go in much deeper. And when you follow with delivery that's nowhere near as smooth and feels kind of awkwardly exaggerated at points, especially on the second verse, all against a sparse piano line and pretty basic drum progression, it's not bad, but Frank Ocean's capable of so much more than this. It honestly feels a little bit like an afterthought that might have been cut from Blonde. And hey, it's cool to see that he's still engaged and might release more music, but as a whole, not a lot to say here. Not bad, but not really great either. Number 71, Changed It by Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne.
Oh my god, they still on the same. You can't say nothing, you can't say nothing. You end up everywhere, you say you was. Is that your boyfriend? Why you say that's your cousin? I don't do handshakes, that shit disgusts.
And now our last three songs are all from Nicki, all a part of her rollout for her new album, which consists of 3 distinctive singles. Now, I don't think this is a particularly smart idea to release them all at once. You run the risk of crowding out the market and pulling attention from one extremely strong lead-off single. Look what happened with Ed Sheeran releasing both Castle on the Hill and Shape of You. Of course, that would rely on the songs actually being good, and I definitely question that with this song. For one, the instrumental is this warping piece of faded synth behind your standard blocky bass and trap progression. The most real change we get is Lil Wayne crooning through even more auto-tune than he ever did, even back in the 2000s, which he mostly uses to force rhymes all throughout his second verse. Lovely. But of course, Nicki's verse is the one that supposedly needs all the attention for supposedly targeting Remy Ma, and no, I'm not impressed. For one, the double entendres often feel like a stretch. The Jay-Z reference at the end of the verse feels incredibly clumsy in how it's flipped, and her low pre-chorus kills any momentum going into the hooks. And Lil Wayne does not help here. He seems more interested in taking shots at Def Jam and asserting how much he's changed. Yeah, not really. I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same. And in that note, this isn't good. Next, number 61, Regret in Your Tears by Nicki Minaj. And now we have Nicki's pop single. Against a desaturated tone, against the pattering groove of the bass, this is her breakup song about Meek Mill, the place where she shows him the curve along his increasing irrelevance, memories that she desperately needs to erase. I guess it's alright. I have no idea why Nicki thought the auto-tune on the second verse was necessary, or that she continues to flub rhymes for no good reason, but you know what? The song does have a little bit of groove and momentum to it. I can kind of see its appeal in a pop context, even if it's a little too desaturated for my taste. Either way, I've never really all been that invested in Meek Mill and Nicki Minaj's relationship, and it's not like she's providing many details surrounding what actually went wrong beyond just moving on here. So I guess I can kind of give it a pass. It's not bad, but it's also nothing I'm going to care about all that much later. Sorry. And finally, number 14, No Frauds by Nicki Minaj featuring Drake and Lil Wayne.
I don't need no lies. Pick a side. I took the prize and lift that bitch up. I took the ice. Let me lift my wrist up. I took the prize and lift that bitch up. I took the ice.
So here's the reason why this song charted as highly as it did. Nicki Minaj's fan base literally circulated a way to game the charts, specifically through on-demand streaming. Now, this is nothing all that new. Fan bases and labels and artists have been trying to push these tricks for decades to game the Hot 100. And in this case, she probably didn't even need it, given her sales numbers. But you know, as someone who at least likes to see some organic growth in the Hot 100, finds the whole practice kind of distasteful and completely antithetical to the idea of rap beef as a whole in hip-hop culture. Nicki will think that she won this because her song charted higher, not because the track is actually good. And fans will try to rewrite the historical narrative into that being true, perpetuating the utterly false equivalence of popularity equaling good. And you know, maybe I'm just used to a higher standard of diss track. I remember the original Ether or when Eminem had his feuds, and I'll say it, this is weak. I don't want to hear on a diss track where you reference your success by saying that you're friends with Ellen. That's not hardcore. And that's nothing saying that Nicki doesn't get a few shots in, targeting Remy Ma for going to jail for robbery instead of staying with her kid and how petty the whole scene was, showing how Jay-Z pulled his verse from Remy Ma's album with Fat Joe, and a slew of her own ghostwriting allegations, so I guess we'll call that a wash. But then Nicki defaults back to her fame, and her success automatically makes her better with a reference to LeBron's rings? Yeah, no. LeBron will be remembered more for his game and his stats and his legacy, and not for his championships. But I think the larger problem is that Nicki isn't just intending the song to be a diss track, but an actual hit on the charts, but with a hook with way too much auto-tune. And it's not a good sign that I actually think Drake has the best verse here. Yeah, sure, it's a support role, but it's actually well done. His flow connects, and I like the crescendo in his vocal tone that actually delivers here. Then there's Lil Wayne, whose verse isn't bad, but it ends really abruptly, and it's not like any of this is flattered by watery production that can't build to a decent melody against your standard cheap trap beat. But overall, I don't really hate this, mostly for Drake's verse. Sheether is a better song, and it's certainly more vicious, but for what this is trying to do, it certainly showcases how Nicki's brand of bland mediocrity applies to just about everything, and it will actually continue to give her success. Lovely. Other words, pass. So this week as a whole, not bad, not good. I can tolerate it mostly. For the best, Lorde is running away with it with Liability, and for the worst, I'm giving it to Changed It by Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne, if only for the egregious abuse of auto-tune and how clumsy it all feels. Next week, though, we get a whole lot more of Drake. Yay, I guess. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.